8:30, so we'll get started. Today is Tuesday, July 24th, 2018, and I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Tennessee Board of Accountancy. This regularly scheduled meeting is taking place in room 1A of the Davy Crockett Tower at 500 James Robertson Parkway in Nashville, Tennessee. The meeting date, time, and location have been properly noticed, and copies of the agenda were posted to the Board of Accountancy website on July 18th, 2018. Wendy, would you perform a roll call to confirm that we've got a quorum?
Janet Booker-Davis.
Here.
Pamela Church.
Here.
Trey Watkins.
Here.
Stephen Eldridge.
Here.
Casey Stewart.
Here.
Gay Moon.
Here.
Judy Weatherby.
Here.
Larry Elmore.
Here.
Kevin Monroe.
Here.
Andy Bonner.
Here.
And Gabe Roberts is not in attendance yet.
Okay. Thank you. I need to announce that Governor Bill Haslam has reappointed Larry Elmore, Stephen Eldridge, and Janet Booker Davis to the board for another 3-year term, so congratulations to you all. So the appointments really are effective immediately and run through June 30, 2021. So our hearing that was scheduled today, as we announced yesterday, it has been continued, so we will not be having lunch, and hopefully we'll be through this meeting shortly before lunch. I want to remind everyone to, when you speak, to speak into the microphone so that I guess your comments can be recorded for the meeting. We need to approve the agenda. I think everybody was previously furnished a copy of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to that agenda? I'll entertain a motion that we approve the agenda then.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now that we've approved the agenda, I want to skip over the first couple of things on the agenda. We've got a guest this morning, Colleen Conrad, who is the Chief Operating Officer at NASBA, and she is very, very knowledgeable of everything that's going on over there, and she's going to talk with us this morning about the alternate pathway, which, as I understand, has taken a big change of direction recently. But Colleen, we'll let you tell us what's going on.
Okay, there. It was awful.
All right. Thank you, and thank you very much for allowing me to join you today.
Let me just interrupt you a minute. We just want to acknowledge that Gabe Roberts is now present, so he is in our meeting. So, sorry, Colleen, go right.
No worries. I've been with NASBA for almost 7 years now, and I hate to say that I have not been to the Tennessee Board office or building, so I appreciate the opportunity to join you this morning. Anyway, I was asked, Wendy asked me after the Eastern Regional meeting, and I know that you had folks in attendance there, to spend a little time chatting with you about the Pathways project that we have underway. And to the broad brush discussion of it is that we all, I think many realize that the profession is evolving and evolving quickly with the increased use of technology, with the changing that is coming to audits. There's going to be a lot of change to how audits are conducted. With the client's use of technology, there's the artificial intelligence, big data, blockchain. See articles every day, and I imagine you do too, about how the larger firms are already embracing a lot of the technology, and it's making its way to the smaller firms, but it usually does start with the larger firms. I just read an article this past week where all of the big four are going to be using blockchain in audits of financial institutions overseas as kind of a test. So you're going to start seeing a lot of these changes. And as we are, we're seeing somewhat of a drop in the hiring of accountants and CPAs at the largest firms, but not a decrease in hiring overall. Instead, they're starting to hire more non-CPAs, more technologists, people with other skills that they're bringing to the table. So as we started considering an audit team, I'm an old auditor, a team that is made up of historically CPAs and some junior accountants who want to be CPAs, and maybe a specialist comes in to help with valuations or derivatives or something like that. We're starting to see teams that are made up of majority of non-CPAs with a CPA partner ultimately signing off on the engagement. And we started to think we really need to be looking at, it's not going away. It's coming. It's already come to the larger firms, and it's making its way fairly quickly into the smaller firms too. So we just knew we needed to look at a consideration of how do we handle a profession where there's such heavy reliance on technical people, on IT professionals, and on others. And so we just felt it was time to start having a conversation with the state boards, with the profession. We came up with an idea that has been evolving over the last 9 months plus, and we and AICPA has taken it to their council, to their board. We took it to our board, to the regional meetings, to the executive directors conference, and said, well, here's an idea to get you thinking. And the idea was two pathways. In essence, taking IT, including students coming up through school who want to focus more on the IT side in business and less on the debits and credits, the audit side, tax, and thinking of maybe we should be considering ways of embracing them into the accounting profession because the teams, even now, someone comes out of school, they become a CPA, they maybe become an auditor, and they don't know much about tax. They become a tax person and they never really do audits. Maybe there's room for additional specialties in the CPA profession that are very important to ensuring that audits are done correctly. Envision a future of not point-in-time auditing. Instead of we're going to do a financial statement audit, historical audit of an entity as of this date, looking backwards. What if it is continuous auditing? What if instead of auditing the set of financial statements, you're auditing the controls, the financial system, and everything that goes with it? That brings to it another type of skill and another level of skill. So we just wanted to put the conversation on the table and introduce it. We introduced one idea, what would it have done would have allowed two pathways to become a CPA. The traditional pathway that we have now, where someone like me and most of you came through, got an accounting degree, got a degree, 150 hours, some of us 120 hours of education in the old days, took the CPA examination, got our experience, got licensed. Another thought was, okay, maybe other students coming up could have a basic background in what we call core competencies in accounting, auditing, business law, tax, but maybe not as deep, maybe not going into governmental accounting or not-for-profit accounting or deep in derivatives or things like that, employee benefit plans, but they are deeper in the IT side of the equation, in the controls, in cybersecurity, in other things that are very important to our profession. And so what we laid out was an idea where CPAs like you and I would take the traditional path, but we would have another path that somebody with that background or who was interested in that expertise could take core examinations on accounting, auditing, business law, tax, etc., but then take examinations that were separate and distinct related to the IT component, the cybersecurity, IT controls, et cetera. And then go through, get the experience, have the same education, 150 hours, same ethics, same, but the examination would be a little bit different, and their education could be a little bit different. So we tossed that out and said, let's talk about this as an idea. I would say the response was less than passionate and robust and excited. So, and we heard you. So this is when I say we heard you. We went to the regional meetings, and I know some of your folks were there. We had regional breakouts after a presentation on the topic, and really said, let us know what you think. Directionally, is this right? Is this particular, the way we've gone about it, not the way that is there something about that that's not appealing to you? And we got a lot of very thoughtful response at both Eastern and Western regionals. AICPA also has been getting feedback. And a lot of the feedback is common, whether it's from the professional association or it's from the state board regulators, which is, this is a very, the feedback is this is a very important topic, and we agree that things need to evolve and change. So I think there was a lot of consensus on that. The challenge was, well, how, these IT people, you're just going to, the comments were, you're going to have IT people take an examination and become a CPA. That doesn't feel right. A CPA is, traditional. It is accounting, audit, tax, consulting. So it didn't feel right that they would go down a separate pathway and become a CPA. So what we've done is we are in a period of, and after the Western Regional, Ken Bishop, and I don't know if you've gotten your state board report yet. It was coming out. It should have probably come out this week. I don't know. Have you received yours yet?
I've seen it.
Okay. Well, when you get it, you're going to see Ken Bishop, our CEO and president, and his president's memo says, the headline is something along the lines of, this dog ain't going to hunt. In essence saying, we've heard you, loud and clear that this two-pathway concept, the way we laid it out, was not going to, that it was not going to be acceptable. So what we are is we're in a period of taking the feedback from the state boards and the suggestions. There were suggestions of, maybe don't like two pathways, but maybe we need to shake it up and say, go back to more like a medical model or another model where you get a basic CPA, but then if you want to audit or if you want to sign off on reports, you have to have an additional layer of experience or licensure. Maybe the examination needs to change. Maybe there does need to be a core set of examinations with specialty examinations over that. Don't know, and I'm not sitting here today. I'm not going to say we've come up with a new answer because it's way too early. It's time for us to take the input that we've received. We've had some very preliminary meetings. Ken Bishop and I have met with Barry Melanson and Sue Coffey and had a chat. We're getting ready to go to our summit meeting next week, which is the senior leadership, volunteer, and staff of both organizations, and we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about this, talking about, okay, what we've heard loud and clear, the suggestion wasn't the right one, but directionally, please keep going and consider other options, other avenues. So that is where we are. I will say separate and distinct, but also part of this project is that we've been looking at the experience requirement. Many would say the experience requirement, the 1 year, in order to sign off on attestation engagements and audits, maybe we should consider increasing the amount of experience needed to sign off on. So there is a separate project where we were looking at, this was exposed at both regional meetings too, so there's materials on it, a concept of requiring firms because you can only do attest audit work through a CPA firm. Only a firm can have that work done, that maybe the firms should require CPAs who are signing to have some additional layer of experience. So that's on the table. Nothing would happen without your input. What I think is going to happen is that at the summit, we're going to agree that it needs to go to the Uniform Accountancy Act Committee, the UAA Committee, to look at and kick around, and at which point, if they think that something should go forward, that there would be an exposure draft that would go out to all state boards, to all interested parties for input at that point too. But we did get a lot of positive feedback from the state boards about the concept of some increasing experience to sign audits and attestation.
Can I ask a question real quick about that? Just out of
Sure.
curiosity here, and you may or may not have this answer. Do y'all have statistics to know how many one-year experienced persons are signing an attest engagement?
I don't think that we do. I know from my history, I was on the...
Let me tell you where I'm going with that.
Okay.
Because before everybody spends, this is obviously my opinion, I don't speak for this board in any manner, but if it's not a problem, per se, if the stats don't support that a one-year person is doing this, then why are we going to add another layer of experience when it may not even be a problem in the profession? And two, I'm already concerned about the number of people getting the CPA exam. And it's like if you add one more restriction as to getting your license, then it just adds another roadblock to us getting students to sit for the CPA exam. We already have a declining number as it is. I'm not an advocate of the 150-hour requirement, personally, because I think it's hampered our ability to recruit more people into the profession. But that's just my 2 cents. If you're taking opinions, I'm glad to give them. But I would caution NASBA to take a look at if you have no one-year people signing attesting, and no person that works for me with one-year experience is going to be signing a report in my office. Why would we go through that process of adding another layer of experience? So I hope there's some thought going into why are we doing this. So
Absolutely, and I appreciate always looking for feedback and comments, so thank you on that. I will say we're working very closely with AICPA through their peer review process, getting input from peer reviewers, because that is a good way to get a sense. Because if you are doing audit work, you have to do it through a firm, and you should be getting a peer review. So we are gathering data that way. I started to say, I was on the Missouri Board of Accountancy for 10 years, and I can say just in my years of service there, I would say we did see, maybe not 1 year, maybe 2, but it's not going to be in a firm of any size. Definitely not. Of course not. It's going to be a sole practitioner who has not done, maybe they've done tax work. We saw it with the employee benefit plan audits, with the Department of Labor issues that we had. A firm that maybe has a construction client who they did their tax work and they go over 100 employees, and now they need an employee benefit plan audit. And they don't want another firm to get in, so they say, okay, I'll figure out how to do it. It's that kind of an example. It's really the small firms taking on work that they're probably not qualified to do, which right now the standards also say you have to be competent to do the work.
But I would tell you this, that
So-
the peer review process is vetting those people out of the marketplace on that stuff. And so, again, I just think I would be cautious of going down a path to say, we're going to change the whole requirements for people to have 2 years of experience, and just because you have this small proportion of a group who's doing something maybe they shouldn't. So
I appreciate the feedback. Another just note, and I know Chair Stewart, you asked me to speak about IQUAB and IQUEC. So when I get to that, we are in the United States the one jurisdiction or country that has a very low experience requirement internationally. So neither here nor there, but that sometimes hampers mutual recognition agreements because we like to think that we're the gold standard in accounting and in the profession, but that's one area where we are lighter.
Wait, let me just say that on this topic of the alternate pathway, I visited the Mississippi Board of Accountancy, and this was one of the also had to lead the breakout session of the Southeast region at the Eastern Regional meeting. There were overwhelmingly negative comments about it. I mean, I agree with Colleen there. Everybody's sitting there saying, with technology and artificial intelligence and big data and data analytics, and those are things that are here, and it's going to get worse rather than better, and so we need to do something. But nobody wanted to open up an alternate pathway. And NASBA, I think there was a feeling that NASBA, with the AICPA, had already decided this is what's going to happen, and we're going to kind of shove this down everybody's throat. And that was clearly not the case. I mean, this is another case where I think NASBA has listened to the feedback. They heard it loud and clear. And this is Ken Bishop's, the newsletter she referred to. The title of his starts off, says, "That dog ain't going to hunt." I mean, this thing was just exposed. What, at the annual meeting, was the annual meeting in New York when it was first talked about?
Just as a general concept is like, okay, do we need to start looking at evolving the profession?
So it happened very quickly that, it was exposed, got feedback, and very quickly they've changed direction. So NASBA will listen. And
well, let me ask you a different question, because we're talking about this year of experience, this an additional year of experience. How many of the foreign countries that we say we're light on experience have a 150-hour requirement for education?
It varies.
Kind of like, we may not have that extra year of experience, but we may require our students to go an additional year in accounting or get a master's, for example, in accounting. And so it's kind of, again, I just worry about fixing something that's not broken, and that's kind of my concern. From my perspective, I'm having a difficult time hiring people. And Kevin, if y'all are throwing off accountants, please have them call me, because I'm looking.
Share your pain, Trey.
I think it's just become more and more difficult. I recognize fully that these IT professionals and all these other people are there, but for me to sign a report, somebody saw fit that I had to go through the whole process and take the exam as is. If people want special, I don't know why an IT person would really want a CPA designation if they didn't go through that same path that I did, because do we really want those people signing a report? It's kind of the thought process there. They may be excellent at data analytics, big data, and blockchain, which I still don't understand. But, I mean, for them to get a CPA designation, maybe there's some other designation you want to come up with to give them. But I'm not sure we want those people actually signing audit opinions.
Can I speak as the educator of the group? I have really, really strong opinions about the direction our profession's been going. I've been doing some research and writing in this area, and I've been in the accounting education profession for 35 years, and I've seen such changes. And I know when the 150-hour requirement was put in, it was saying we want generally liberally educated people, and then the technical part goes on top of it. Well, what's happened is there's such a demand for the students that firms are responding logically to their pressures, and students and parents are responding logically to economic pressures. And they see it as a win-win if you can compress that education, get them out there, and knock off those credits as much as they can. So what's happening is that fifth year is now undefined. Most state boards, including us, are now allowing people to take the exam soon after the fourth year. So what's the fifth year? What is the purpose of it? And so you see schools who don't want to let this go because, frankly, it's revenue, and accounting professors at many schools are expensive and hard to find as well, and so they need the money. So you see money driving some decisions, and they're filling up the courses, the credits, with things that used to be outside the curriculum. And I'm all for internships, but some schools give up to 9 credits for internships. So what happens there? You pay your tuition for 9 credits, you go and work, and the professors don't have to do anything. So we don't have enough professors, so that's great. And they get experience. They charge, you pay $3,500 for Becker, and you get 9 credits for Becker, and so you pay for Becker tuition. All those things are wonderful. We love our Becker representative. We work closely with them. But should it be credit that the school gets paid for that they're not doing anything for that used to be outside the curriculum? And, of course, there are a lot of online institutions where you can get a master's degree just almost entirely that way. So I am really worried about the ethics of our profession, where we're telling students, in some cases, if they're traditional age, their parents, we must have 150 credits. You must pay for this education. And you can't go into our profession if you don't. And then you add to it the fact that the exam just keeps changing. I mean, we've had so many times lately where we had to postpone grading or whatever, give people extensions because the grading was deferred because there have been changes again, and the standards keep changing. I mean, as an educator, you feel like you're shooting at a moving target. So people start the exam, and they start studying one way, and then it changes, and then they get frustrated. So you had a representative come and say, we're doing a survey to see why people don't stick it out. That's why they don't stick it out. It keeps changing. There's not a clear path. I think the bar exam, I know the pass rate's a lot higher, but you know what to expect, and it's just really tough. So anyway, and one more thing. Firms are taking this into their own hands. So I was shocked 2 years ago, and my little school, I don't keep up with things maybe as much, but students were coming to me saying, KPMG started this program where you do a traditional undergraduate degree, and then in your 5th year, they're setting up schools with data analytics programs. So they're not waiting for NASBA or the ASCPA to vet this. They need it, and so they are funding the schools. And so I fear that our profession is not driving this vehicle, that the players are. And so I think, here's my recommendation, I think the path needs to be more direct, whatever it is. And I think we need to know what that 5th year is for if we're going to require it. And, KPMG says the 5th year could be a great place to do data analytics. But you said there are specialties, yes, but they all had to get those basics and they all had to take an exam. But maybe the exam doesn't have to cover lots of governmental accounting, which has exploded on the exam, or specialty taxation, or deep derivative things, because a lot of people never see it. Maybe we could dial that down and then let people specialize. So I think we're trying to fix, you said don't fix something if it's not broken. I think we're trying to fix a broken system. That's what I think. So.
I wouldn't have near as big a problem with a 2-year experience if they didn't have 150 hours. I mean, that's how it used to be, right?
I make my living this way. I don't want to get rid of 150, but I want.
So you're the
to
problem.
know why. I want to be able to tell people why, and our students more and more are being pulled away into oh, don't get that extra year. Just do a semester and don't get a master's, and I think that's a disservice to the students too. So I want to be up front.
Can I ask a quick question or make a comment, I guess? I was at the G400 this year, and a lot of the comments that were made there were echoed what you're saying, and I completely agree with the technology needs and the way our industry is changing, and I think it's going to change a lot more rapidly than it has in the past. I think the statistic I heard is it'll change more in the next 3 to 5 years than it has in the past 30 years, which, gosh, a long time. I mean, but I guess one of my things, and obviously I don't personally support that idea of allowing us, technology CPA path or whatever, but I do think there is a need for that. And why isn't there more of an embrace of the other credentials and things that are out there? And we have that. I mean, Osaka's got the CISA and the ICPA. I don't know where that went, but the CITP, they've got that. I mean, why are we trying to reinvent this? We have technology people that audit with us on engagements. They're not CPAs, but they have their own CISSP or whatever those real deep technical things are. And it seems like everyone sticks with their role and gets the tool that they need to accomplish the goal that they have and embrace that. I mean, that's, rather than reinventing the wheel, why don't we just kind of use what we have and maybe package it up a little bit better? So that would be my recommendation if you're looking for one more. I know you've got a shortage, huh?
Believe me, and what I'm hearing here today, and Casey would probably echo, are things that we heard in the regional meetings. It's very disparate opinions. It's a lot of concern and questions like you have. You speak to the education. We heard, well, maybe some of the 30 hours should be IT. You should require more specificity to your education. And require more IT. But you talk to some educators, and they say a lot of it needs to be baked into the courses that's already there, as opposed to being separate courses. So we also have a project looking at accreditation. This is one profession that relies on accreditation to determine whether education is acceptable or not, and we are seeing, credit for life experience, a lot of the online, which, there's a lot of great online education, but there's some that's maybe not so great too. And transparency in transcripts. Somebody gets education, you don't know, even if a state says you're only allowed so much online education, it's hard to tell from transcripts when you're doing that evaluation. So there's a lot of side projects related to some of the things that you're talking about, but speaking to the IT, what you brought up, Mr. Eldridge, was that it's fine when you have, I have examples of, say, a SOC engagement, which is an internal control or a cybersecurity engagement. Right now, many of the CPAs aren't deep in those topics, so they have a team of, you have one CPA and a team of people who are not CPAs, but the CPA has to sign off. And that's, in my mind, where I started thinking maybe there needs to be room for people that truly understand business, have the basics in accounting, definitely in auditing and internal controls, that maybe there is a place in the CPA world for people with more of an IT expertise. The other thought is, why not just rely on other credentials, which I think there are a lot of great credentials out there, but by making somebody a CPA, it does protect the public more than those credentials, which there is no, if they do something against the standards of that credential, they lose their credential. But the public knows that if somebody is dealing with a CPA, that they are regulated, that there is a robust process they've gone through to be educated, taken examinations, et cetera. So
are you going to do that all with people that do single audits and people that do retirement plan audits? And I mean, you're talking about the
There are already
same scenario. I mean,
CPAs,
my point is that we could go down a rabbit hole where everybody's a specialist in one particular area. And what's going to happen is somebody's going to dabble in something they shouldn't be dabbling in. And it's just, you're supposed to get the education to sign off on those engagements. The CPE is required. And, you know, to me, that's kind of your check. And you have your peer reviews, and people examine that and make sure that you're doing what you are doing and you're getting the education you should. So, yes, while somebody's doing a SOC engagement that's a CPA, they should be getting the continuing ed in that area in which they're practicing. And that's a danger sign if they get a peer review and don't have it. So I don't know that a designation necessarily overcomes that, per se.
All of this, just so you know, I'm
not shooting the messenger.
and
I
I'm
just
and
want
I'm
to make sure that
very interested in hearing what you're saying,
Right.
and we'll take it to the continuing conversations.
I hope that I wish our industry could really truly embrace, and this is my opinion, the CPA's role as the team captain. I mean, that's kind of the way I've looked at it. Is they go into the engagement, they're hired to give the opinion, and you get the tools that you need, the different staff skill sets and all that, and you sign off on their work, and rather than try and reinvent the wheel, and I guess maybe this is an unfair statement, but it's almost like it's. I'm fearful we're going to water down the credential we have, and rather than say let's bring everybody in as a CPA, let's create a network to where we. And I'm not saying we have to recognize different whatever credentials they are, but why not? I mean, they're trained, and I've got my CISA, and I have to do a whole separate set of CPE for it just because. And so, why try to reinvent the wheel? I mean, let IT people be IT people, and let accountants be, CPAs be CPAs, and if we need to get an actuary, we're going to make them let everybody keep it, but work together as a collective group that serves the clients for their best interest, instead of trying to fit everybody into the same semi-mold there.
I can just say that, I went to the Western Regional, and I was very impressed with how NASBA got the groups together, and they had breakout sessions, and in this very same conversation, I was in a room that it was as detailed as this, and I was impressed with the way that they went through and they heard what people were saying. And coming, since that was like 3 weeks ago, they're still vetting the process of okay, then how do we get to that level? And they're listening, and I know that several members of NASBA are going through, and they're pulling the ideas together. They're working with the educators. They're working with firms to ask them questions, and I was just very impressed with how they're taking back what the whole breakout sessions and also the East came up with, to say, hey, I really don't think the alternative pathway is the way. And so, it's impressive how they're pulling us all together to view hey, maybe it's an educational issue, or maybe it's we need to change how we do this, because you do need that core, you need that CPA, that accounting side. And, at the same time, they're sitting there looking at the future saying, okay, what if we don't have GLs? What if everything's blockchain, and you go to the cloud and you pull out the transactions and all the contracts are electronical? How do we step up our profession to where the people who are involved in that, they understand the technology? Because we may have the reverse happen. We may have people signing off on reports that don't even understand the technology that pulled the report together. So the world's changing, and I'm glad that they're on our side and they're looking at it and they're trying to come up with a solution, and it's exciting to see.
Follow up on Dr. Church's comments. One of the concerns that I have, and maybe we don't realize how blessed we are in Tennessee, but we've got upwards of a dozen really high quality academic programs in this state. Or if you brought it up to Kentucky or over to Mississippi or down to Alabama, and just look in the greater Nashville area, and then you look at Memphis, at Rhodes and UT Memphis, I mean, you've got really solid accounting programs here. And one of my concerns, and you mentioned one of the big four firms that's looking at what to do with that fifth year, in essence, is that it's going to compel consolidation of academic programs that's going to limit entry into the profession. And, you know, I come from a small accounting program myself. I mean, in my cohort, we had 40 graduates, not 400 or not, 1,400 or something of that nature. So I'm somewhat sympathetic to a smaller program and its survival. And we're really blessed in Tennessee to have a great number of good programs. And so one of the worries that I have is whatever we do or refrain from doing, we're going to damage that infrastructure, which is really, at least in Tennessee, producing a number of just great CPAs. And I fear that we're going to lose that if we're not careful. And part of that was I don't think we had a good plan for what that extra 30 hours should have been comprised of when we imposed that requirement, and we're still paying the price for that now.
I really appreciate that, of course. You mentioned accreditation. Rhodes is not AACSB accredited, and we probably never, well, in the near future, I don't see our choosing that path. But 100% of our students get hired, 75% go to Big Four. We have close ties to local and regional firms. The market has said they really value what we teach our students, that combination of critical analysis, et cetera, and business. And so I know when the Pathways Education project a few years ago was underway, there was some talk about law school type models. And I was just furious, not for Rhodes, but because we're not even using the extra 30 credits that the profession has given us. We're not using them prudently. And we're going to ask the students and parents to pay for 3 years now. It seemed to me, again, to just be turfdom, to be an attempt by schools to say, we need that school, because small schools are not going to have that school. I hope that, and I'm sure you are, but I just hope you keep that in mind. And I hope that you will look to the market, because frankly, the market has said all along that extra, I hate to say this because we do have that program at Rhodes, but I mean the extra hours, they're not sure of the purpose. I mean, I do know that it gives our students a status. I mean, anytime you have more depth and more education, there's a maturity and a weeding out, frankly, that is great. But we need to know why, and the market needs to know why, so that they're saying, oh, get in there and do that. So I think that we need to clarify the path we've got, and then if there's a fifth year, let's use it. Let's use it for IT or different things. But anyway, I hope that you don't kick the small schools out, because the firms do value those students.
Colleen, that's essentially where NASBA is listening to comments like this and trying to figure out what the next option or options might be. Is that not correct?
Absolutely. Like I said, these kinds of comments we've heard multiple times, and what we've done is pulled them together, and we're looking at them to say, okay, well, given this, given the concerns, given the opinions and thoughts, what might be a next step? What should we be looking at? So I truly do appreciate, especially coming to a board meeting and having an entire state board here to give input is very helpful. Very helpful.
Do you have time to maybe talk with us a little bit about the mutual recognition agreement process? And I know you're not totally into that process, but you must know more about it than we do. So if there's anything you could share or got time to share with us about the process, because we had some discussion of that yesterday, and your comments might be helpful.
Sure, happy to do that. So there's a joint board called, it's the IQAB, which is the International Qualification Acceptance Board, made up of an equal number of NASBA appointees who are all state board folks, and AICPA has people appointed too. And the whole there is a very formal senior board that is their whole job, is to look at and consider whether there should be historically mutual recognition agreements between the United States and other countries. There's a recognition that there are the chartered accountants of Canada who have now become CPAs, meaning different things, but that they have gone through a robust process just like U.S. CPAs and learned a lot of the same things. And there are times when and I will say a U.S. CPA moves to Canada, wants to practice in Canada, and is there a way to make them not have to go through all of the education, all of the experience, all of the examination all over again? Is there a way to recognize that there are commonalities to what was included in the education, what was included in the examination, and in the experience? So there aren't very many mutual recognition agreements. Right now there are a few. The one that is by far used the most is the Canadian one. So what that means is I'm a U.S. CPA. I want to become a CPA in Canada. There's a way for me to, instead of having to prove out all of my education and everything again, that I can take an examination that is focused on what are the significant differences between the laws and rules in Canada and what they are in the United States. The flip side of that is a Canadian CPA can do the same thing. So right now, if a Canadian CPA wants to become a U.S. CPA, they apply to a state. They choose the state that they apply to, and they have to, if they are a chartered accountant, they have to, one, prove up that they are licensed and in good standing, that they have the appropriate experience, and then they can take the regulations section of the CPA exam right now that is the proxy for what's called IQEX, which is the examination that someone has to take to become licensed in the United States as a CPA. So regulation being important because our tax schema is very different and our laws are very different in the United States. So that is, and that it is determined that the audit and accounting and business BEC, which is organizations of businesses and economics and cost accounting, are more similar. So it's really focused. So these are folks who, it's not the person who got their education in accounting in Canada and never became a Canadian CPA. It's someone who has been, so it tends to be, and the reason this is because it's often large firms shifting people between countries is one reason, or it is truly a relocation. Somebody wants to move from the United States to Australia, as an example. We have MRAs with Ireland and Scotland and two different aspects of Australia and New Zealand. There's one with Hong Kong that is about to be renewed. And by the way, they go through a very rigorous process. AICPA looks at the examination of the other country to compare it against the U.S. CPA exam to ensure it's not just, kind of doing one of these. It's really looking at it in detail. NASBA has experts that look at the education requirements of the other country to ensure that they're very similar. So many countries, there's no mutual recognition because there's just so much difference. I'll use Germany as an example. Germany, it's not our requirements that are more rigorous, it's their requirements that are more rigorous. To become a German, and the word is like this, and it's not anything that sounds like accountant, they have to have like 5 years of experience to become licensed there. So it's so disparate that it doesn't allow for an equivalence. So we don't have an MRA with Germany, where that might be a country where we would. Is it used a lot? No, but there aren't tons of people coming through the international process every year, but there are some. We are looking at doing an MRA with ICAEW, which is England and Wales, so that we have not had one with England. And that is one that we think that, because there are a lot of chartered accountants from England that are in the United States. They work in firms, they work in business and industry. I mean, there are thousands of them that would like to become a CPA but don't want to go through the whole 4 parts of the examination and everything. And so it does make it easier, but it is a robust process, and there's every so many years we have to go back and look at and make sure that nothing has changed with their program or our program that would mean an MRA is no longer valid. I don't know if that's helpful, if there's more that you'd like.
A long-term evolving kind of thing, like the mutual recognition agreement with Scotland, was that not in process for like 20 years?
Yes, we could just never come to agreement. And they finally, frankly, because the long-term CEO of the organization was about to retire, he actually just left the organization recently. They pushed through to get it done. Because what's the challenge has been when we say a mutual recognition agreement, that requires that it truly is close enough that that people can go from one country to the other and vice versa. We've also added to the UAA the possibility of unilateral reciprocity, meaning in my case of Germany, where they definitely meet our examination requirements and education requirements and experience requirements, we don't measure up to their experience requirements by such a long shot that they're not comfortable having U.S. CPAs become German CPAs without getting that additional experience. As a state licensing board, we can say to you, because IQAB has looked at it, that the German CPA does meet the requirements of the states here, and so even though it may not be mutual, you could consider, it's up to state boards to decide whether to do it or not, to allow that German CPA to come to the U.S. and feel confident that they have the education, the experience, and the examination once they take IQEX to prove out their tax and law knowledge in the United States to become a U.S. CPA. So that's fairly new. We haven't seen anything. It's in the UAA, and some states are including it, but we aren't seeing a lot of unilateral movement yet.
Pauline, I'm not asking you to weigh in on the decision we're looking at today, but just as an example, there are 2 certifications in Australia, and there's a difference between them. But I've thought about this, and I have a question. Would it be true that anyone who was granted reciprocity or any certificate that was recognized would have the capacity to sign an audit report in their host country? Because I'm going by comments I've found online, and some people compared one of the types of certificates to a management accounting certificate, which does not give people here the capacity to sign audit reports. So it just made me question, do all of these certifications carry that ability?
My understanding, yes, that is one of the requirements, that they have to have the ability to sign attestation or audits in their own country to be considered equivalent. Yes, absolutely. Which is has been one of the challenges with some of the countries, is there's no.
And I can see that you mentioned international firms, for example, or companies. I can see that a large international company who moves people around would struggle with this type of situation if they could not have this reciprocity. So anyway, it was just something that I started thinking about.
One of the reasons, too, that we have gone to offering the U.S. CPA exam at prometric test centers in other countries, because India is an example. We're not in India yet, but we're looking at it. But there's a lot of large and not even the biggest firms that have staff in India. There's a lot of multinational companies
They're
who
taking
have
the U.S.
staff.
CPA exam over there, aren't they?
They're taking the U.S.
Yeah.
CPA exam, and they want to be a U.S. CPA because it proves to their employer, it gives them opportunities to then maybe move to the United States or work for these U.S. operations. It shows they know U.S. GAAP and U.S. gas and U.S. tax law. So that's one of the reasons you say, well, why do we give the U.S. CPA exam internationally? It's because there is a desire for it to become a U.S. CPA.
Okay, I know you have another meeting to go to, I believe.
I have a plane to catch. I'm okay.
You're
But,
okay? Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate you working
There-
me in this morning. And
Okay.
but any other questions? I'm just delighted to be here and see some of you face to face for the first time, and a lot of people that I've been around at our meetings. And
I can tell you this group is not as hostile as Mississippi.
I've been to Mississippi meetings. I've been to Mississippi meetings too, and they're very hospitable to me anyway.
You had a different experience than we did. But no, it wound up okay. But I thought we were going to have to give Daniel Dustin some CPR or something after the meeting. But
Well, in my mind, I mean, we're here for you. Our mission is to support the state boards, to be a common voice, but to be a common voice, we need to know what your voice is, and so we take that very seriously. So I appreciate the opportunity to come today.
thank you. Okay. Okay, my iPad's turned off, so I'm going to have to get it back on to figure out where we are on the agenda. I think we're at the point we need to approve the minutes of our last meeting, and I think everybody was provided a copy of those prior to the meeting. I would ask if there are any corrections or changes that we need to make. Okay, you want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Second.
All right. Any discussion of the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That brings us down, I guess, Wendy, to your director's report. Do you want to, again, we got a copy of that, but you may want to add some verbal comments?
Sure, thank you. Right, in the director's report, basically, I just kind of highlighted some of the NASBA activities over the past quarter since our last meeting. Of course, we've mentioned the regional meetings that several of you attended, Eastern and Western. As Colleen mentioned, the biggest topic of conversation was that alternate pathway, but there were some other items of importance that were covered as well, so thought it was a great meeting. The annual NASBA meeting is in October in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I know I have several of you on the list that would like to go, so I'll be touching base with you at the time the registration opens to see if that's still your desire to go. If anyone would like to add their name, feel free to shoot me an email, and I will add you to the list. One of the other topics at the regional meetings was they've been holding 2 regional meetings, Eastern and Western. And one of the topics was, a suggestion was made to hold 1 meeting in June of each year so that the whole group could come together, similar to the annual meeting. So the agendas would stay similar, but it would be at 1 location and everyone would attend. So I think the feedback was fairly positive. The one downside was you didn't have alternate dates to choose from if it didn't work with your schedule. So if anybody has any opinions on that or thoughts, I can certainly share those with NASBA if you want to let me know. NASBA Strategic Planning Workshop, I've agreed to serve on this planning task force, so we are meeting in August to review. I think every few years they review their strategic plan, and there's a variety of people on that that represent different aspects on that task force to give input. So we're meeting here in Nashville at the end of August. AICPA has an award that they give every year called the Elijah Watt Sells Award, and it is related to the exam, and is offered to recognize candidates who score 95.5 cumulative score or higher on the exam. They pass each part the first time, and they finish within the year 2017. So we did have one winner from Tennessee. So in the past, we have sent the individual a congratulatory letter, so I plan to do that again this time. And the person is Elizabeth Smith. She's a graduate of Athens State University with a bachelor's in accounting and a master's in taxation from Florida Atlantic University. She's employed with Mary. The next part of the report is the CPE audit, and just giving you a rundown. We've just completed this for this year, or completed the initial review of all the submissions. So initial notices were sent out in April to 532 licensees for the 2016-2017 period. Responses were due by May 31st. As of July 16th, all submissions have been reviewed for compliance. Staff works tremendously hard to get through all of these and be timely and responsive to the individuals. So you'll see below that some statistics that we've initially pulled together. Initially compliant, we had 344 individuals, or 65%. Below that, you'll see that some of them were compliant with carryover hours, and some were compliant because they had a home state exemption, so they actually live in another state and have shown proof of compliance in that state, which meets our requirements. Initially non-compliant, we had 156 individuals, 29%. 78 of those individuals became compliant with penalty hours. Either they had already obtained those penalty hours or very quickly obtained those penalty hours. Am I saying that correctly? We did have to remove a few from the audit. Sometimes, because it's a random process, we select people that haven't been licensed for the full period, so they didn't have a requirement, or they're deceased, or something of that nature, and we do have to remove a few each time. We still had a few in process at the time we prepared these. We did have 12 with no response. I think we're down to 11 with no response, so we're in the process of opening complaints on those 11 individuals for a non-response. The next chart shows penalties that we've assessed so far.
Hey, Wendy, can I just ask a
Sure.
quick question? That 29%, how does that compare to other years? Do you have any idea?
That's a little bit higher, I believe. Yeah. And eventually that will come down because people will get the penalty hours. But
there's an initial problem in the fact that people
Yep.
aren't getting their hours that they're required to get.
Right. Right.
Which goes back to our conversation yesterday about perhaps submitting at least a listing of what they've taken.
So I'd also like to point out that our numbers could be skewed a little higher because when you renew your license, you do all your check boxes, all right? So if you indicate that you didn't get something, you didn't get any CPE on your renewal, or you checked you didn't get your state-specific ethics, we throw you on the list. So there could be some skewed a little bit higher because we're getting some people that are simply saying, I missed this or didn't get it.
Well, Wendy,
They still may be non-compliant. They're just telling you they're non-compliant.
So when you say we throw them on the list, which list is that?
Well, we do our random selection for audit. Throw them on the
Okay.
list to be audited.
Okay.
Sorry.
Got it.
List for the CPE audit. So in that second box, we talk about the penalties assessed. So this is where people are missing the mark. So 75 people missed the 80 hours, 75 people missed the minimum in 16, 33 missed the minimum in 17, 70 missed state ethics, and to your point, Kevin, 30 people missed only state ethics. And I think that works out to be about 19% of the total number of non-compliant folks. The technical, 39 folks missed the technical requirement, and 4 people missed the A&A. So those people claim they did a test work but did not complete the required A&A. And remember that folks could be assessed more than one type of penalty. So the numbers are higher than the individuals who are non-compliant. So before I move on, are there any more questions related to those stats? Okay. Just an update on the peer review changes. Of course, our rule's effective now, where we can obtain the results of peer review. Karen, I'll be meeting actually tomorrow with a representative at the AICPA to walk through the portal where those documents are available to make sure we understand all the reporting and the documents. TSCPA activities, of course, I attended their convention and council meeting. Chairman Stewart and I are scheduled to attend their board of directors workshop in August. We've been invited to come talk about things that the board is looking at and make a presentation to them. I believe, Andy, you may be attending as well. So we'll have some good discussions with them on some of these trending topics. Next page is future meeting dates, which we'll vote on at the end of the report. New licenses issued. I just kind of continue to note this because we are seeing a bit of a decline in initial licensing. Second quarter, we were, it looks like, exactly the same as last year during the second quarter. However, if you add quarter 1 and quarter 2, we're below the past 2 years. So we'll continue to look at that trend. And then last page is our overall licensing. Active licensees at the end of June were 11,055, which is a slight uptick from June of last year. So that remains positive. If there are questions, I can entertain those, or we can ask for a motion on the meeting date, proposed meeting date.
I had a quick question. I'm trying to see what that section was. It said that under the Elijah Watt Sales Award, that 95,858 individuals sat in 17. Is that up or down from previous years, or do you know that?
I do not know that.
I'd be curious just to see if less people are taking it, or I mean, because
People are passing. Less people passing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a concern, a major concern, because I think it's hard to find. I mean, accounting students are becoming a very sought-after commodity because they just don't exist as much.
We do need to get a motion to approve that future meeting date of October 22nd, 2019.
And we are still on, these are still Monday, Tuesdays. This is, of course, our first Monday, Tuesday meeting. We may have to do some room adjustments. We are starting to conflict with some other boards with the Monday, Tuesday meetings, which is to be expected. There are a lot of boards. But everything looks like we can work it out. So
I'll entertain a motion to approve that date, please.
So moved.
Okay.
A second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Hey.
Any opposed? Okay. That pretty much conclude your director's report, Wendy.
yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is the reinstatement application for Stuart Owen Heath, and again, you've got a package of information that was furnished prior to the meeting. Wendy, do you perhaps want to make some introductory comments here or refresh us on where?
Okay. Mr. Heath has submitted an application for reinstatement of his revoked license. At the last meeting, you all saw his completed application and approved that application for presentation at this meeting. This is an opportunity for you to talk to Mr. Heath and ask questions as you consider whether to reinstate his revoked license. What I can do at this point is, first of all, confirm that his application is complete. He's submitted everything required. I can also read the findings of fact from the consent order that he signed. And then he has a pretty extensive petition in there. Hopefully you all had a chance to read, or I can give you a few minutes to read that, and then we can ask him to come up and you can ask questions.
Mr. Heath is here today with his attorney, okay? Would it be appropriate to ask them to come forward to the podium? I have read the materials that were sent out before. Does anyone need time to read those during the meeting here, or did you get a chance to look at them beforehand? Ready to go? Okay, then I think we simply open it up to the board. You know, if you have any questions or things you would like to ask Mr. Heath, any discussion of the materials you have. Maybe let's take a minute and let everybody maybe refresh their memory on looking at these things. Let's take 4 or 5 minutes. Mr. Heath, do you have anything you would like to say that maybe to get things started?
I would just like to say that I first thank you for the opportunity to speak to this request. I'm here because of mistakes that I made. Not necessarily in the practice of accounting, but nonetheless mistakes that I made, and I could go through a whole litany of those that ended up in complaints that you've had to deal with in the past. So I'm not here claiming to be a victim of circumstance or anything responsible for my own actions. That being said, I have almost 9 years ago, next week, the gun charge, which is in the package of information, destroyed my life as I knew it at that point in time, even though I was cleared of and even all that, I take full responsibility for everything leading up to that. Since that time, I spent several years not really paying attention, not really even having a long-term outlook on life, But since that time, I have been divorced, but I've put 2 children through college. I have had stints of successful business in industry. I've held titles as COO, CFO a couple of times, and now sort of unintentionally self-employed again because I was laid off from my last position due to the media business being what it was. I'm still consulting with that company and with another prior employer as well. Primarily business consulting and strategy, and my goal today is to perhaps remove a black mark from my business career. I have stop having to start new business relationships with. I am not a CPA. I did that as recently as last week, it's. So I feel like I have honored the revocation the way it's supposed to be done. And it's it's a difficult thing, having been one and practiced for almost 25 years. I start most new relationships with that fact. I am no longer a CPA. So, and that usually leads into a not short conversation. So, anyway, appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for the consideration. Happy to answer any and all questions.
Cindy, his what do you call it? The actions that we took, that shows up on that database.
I would have to go make sure due to the time period that's passed. I can't recall how far we went back. Now, keep in mind that if you were to reinstate his license, the status of his license would show accurately, once we reactivated it.
What is that?
So, through that database, he would show to have an active.
That it was inactive and went active, or it was
Right.
in
It would
revoked
show-
status to.
It would show that whatever the current status is, so let's say you all approved to reactivate it, it would show an active license, and then there's a tab for discipline. You could go there. If it was added, someone could still see that he had been disciplined at one point in time and call the office and request information on
But
that.
people that we put on that database, do you have to go to that tab as well? Or is it flagged?
It's on a separate tab.
Everybody's on a separate tab, is
Right.
what you're saying.
Mhm. Right.
So if you want to see disciplinary, it's all.
On a separate tab.
Separate
it's
tab.
easy to see.
Okay.
And it's a flag of.
It doesn't say their name, and there's like a red flag beside it that
No.
says this happened in the
No,
past.
it's a separate tab that you go to, and it basically says this person's been disciplined, contact the board for more information.
I have one question for Mr. Heath. And so, Mr. Heath, you mentioned, if you are reinstated, it would be nice to not start a conversation that says, I'm not an active CPA. Do you have a sense or plans for how you would, you're requesting the reinstatement, so you're presumably going to use the rights and responsibilities and privileges that are granted to a practicing CPA. Do you have a sense of how you plan to utilize the CPA certificate in the immediate future? And it's all right if you don't, but if you do and would be willing to share.
I think it's probably easier to say what I don't plan to do. At the moment, I am essentially being a contract CFO for different. I did an awful lot of that when I was practicing as well, and I pretty well stopped a test work around the year 2000. Back when I was doing that anyway. Some of that was because I was interested in real estate and other activities. I have zero plans of going back to a test work. I wouldn't mind going back and doing some tax work for some of my former clients, which I am still very close with, and I would like to do that for them again. So, so that's kind of, so primarily heavy consulting, working closely as like a contract CFO in those types of, that's what I really enjoy doing. I think I'm a value add to the organization, but I have no desire whatsoever to go back to.
Wendy, I have one question. I think we may have answered this, but I want to be sure. Has he done everything he needs to do to get with his applications and everything? Everything's in order and everything's
He's
been done?
completed his application. He's submitted CPE. We also reached out to the injured parties noted in the initial complaint. One individual, asking them, giving both of them the opportunity to attend or respond in some way. One individual said they would not be attending. We did not hear from the second individual, so we did attempt to hear from them. Other than that, everything is in order with his application.
I'll just say that, what I consistently say is that revocation is a pretty heavy-handed penalty, and I just appreciate the fact that Mr. Heath came here today, has gone through the process to actually seek to be reinstated, and it seems to me like the process has worked as we envision it whenever we look at it prospectively from the Enforcement Committee piece. And so I appreciate you being here today, and appreciate you coming back to seek to be regulated by this governing body.
Any other comments, questions?
I just appreciate the hard work that went into. I know there were a lot of CPE requirements, and sometimes those things can be a very tall mountain to climb. And I concur with Gabe. I mean, for you sticking this process out, and you said 9 years. Is that right?
Well, the revocation was actually effective in 2011.
Okay.
But the events that led to my essentially stepping out of life was 9 years ago next week. So.
I think that speaks volumes to this board, and I respect you a great deal for having gone through and walked through that process.
Thanks, Judy. Anybody else? Well, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'd like to move that we accept this application for reinstatement.
I would second that.
Okay.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion of the motion?
Mr. Chairman, just to make sure that I understand the motion is there, you have various options if you want to add anything to that, meaning you can reinstate with probation. Make sure everybody knows that before I don't think there's an indication of that. I just want to make sure you all knew.
And I'll just briefly review the applicable rules before you hold the vote. It's Rule 0020-01-.10, Paragraph 4. In considering an application, the board may consider all activities of the applicant since the revocation or suspension was imposed, the offense for which the applicant was disciplined, the applicant's activities during the time the license was in good standing, the applicant's rehabilitative efforts, the applicant's restitution to damaged parties in the matter for which the discipline was imposed, and the applicant's general reputation for truth and professional probity. The board may also question the applicant, complainant, or individual injured by the applicant. Paragraph 5. After consideration of the applicant's petition, the board may, in its sound discretion, reinstate any revoked or suspended license. The board shall notify such applicant of its decision in writing. Paragraph 6. The board may impose appropriate terms and conditions for reinstatement of a license or modification of a revocation, suspension, or probation. Paragraph 7. No application for reinstatement will be considered while the applicant is under sentence for any criminal offense, including any period during which the applicant is on court-imposed probation or parole. Paragraph 8. A certified public accountant or public accountant whose license has been suspended must meet all continuing professional education and renewal fee requirements during the term of the suspension.
Yeah, but there is nothing in what you just read that says our motion is inappropriate. No, you're just reminding us of.
Just a reminder of all of your options.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Again, thank you, Mr. Heath, for being here, and hope this is what you were looking for, and we certainly are looking for you to be a good member of the CPA community again. So
much. It's a lot better than I hoped for.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Good luck.
Would everyone like to take a short break? I think we're moving along very well and on target to get through on time, but let's take 10 minutes and come back.
Second that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, but we'll go down there.
That's all we have right there.
Let's go ahead and get started. And I had announced before that the formal hearing that's was scheduled for today has been continued, and that's still true. But I think legal counsel wants to address the board and maybe give us some options. So.
I'm speaking on behalf of Chief Counsel. He had an idea he just wanted to present to you all for your opinion on it. Honestly, there is really no, from our team, we could do either way, but we wanted to make sure you all were aware of the options. Currently, we've continued the case to October 23rd, so that would appear before you. Not to get into any details of the case, but it is a pretty straightforward unlicensed activity case. Those are the allegations we would be making. Currently, we don't have authority to do that before a judge alone, but if this board wanted to grant authority to legal counsel to, instead of waiting till October, having the hearing sooner before just a judge, where the judge would be the decision maker, this board also has the authority to do that. So in case you didn't want to wait till October 23rd, or since it is a pretty simple hearing, if you wanted to pass that authority to an ALJ, you all can do that. We just want to make sure you knew that that was an option to you. But again, we don't have a preference from legal counsel. We could proceed either way.
Would we be giving the fact-finding authority over to the judge in that case?
Would, yes.
What's an ALJ?
It's an administrative law judge. So the folks that sat with you, like Judge Hilliard, who was here at the last hearing, it would be a member of their panel would hear the hearing.
So I know what my agency's position is on this. I'm interested, I don't know what CNI's position on this is. Is there some level of precedent then that if the ALJ decided a fact that we disagreed with, would we be handcuffed going forward to find consistently with that?
No, there's no precedential value in any of their adjudications.
You're saying under that option, no member of this board would need to be present
That's
during
correct.
that hearing. So.
That's correct. It would be the judge making a two-step determination whether a test work was performed and then whether that person did or did not have a license.
Have we done that? I'm sorry. Have we done that before?
I have not seen this board delegate that authority in that way before. Currently, I think the only delegation of authority to an ALJ is for CPE deficiencies.
I'm sorry. Does CNI have other boards that do that?
Oh, yes. In fact, many of my boards, they don't hear any of the hearings themselves. It's all ALJ designated.
What are examples of the types of boards that do that?
Sure. Cosmetology currently hears no hearings. Motor V only does license statuses. The A&E board allows unlicensed activity to go to the ALJ alone. Unlicensed activity is actually the most common.
Architects and engineers?
That's architects and engineers. That's correct.
I guess my only concern would be, with all due respect to those boards and to the ALJ, I mean, does the ALJ, it's really a question for them, does the Administrative Procedures Division feel like they understand the nuances of the Act and this profession such that they can make determinations of fact?
That's typically the way we would do it. Would have to be through expert presentation, especially for something like exactly what you're talking about, Gabe. Obviously, these are ALJs that don't come from an accounting background, so we would need to explain to them what would be deemed a test work and why a certain piece of work is or is not a test. And so the goal in the hearing would be to do that through expert testimony. This is one of our...
You're saying it would basically make your job probably more difficult, right?
No, we're going to put on the exact same case
You would
we
do
were
it
going to put on.
regardless.
That's right. This is a very...
Cut and dry
case. So it would have been, our intention, we would actually probably modify nothing either way, which is why this is truly just to give you the option if you'd like to not have to deal with it in October or if you'd like it to be heard sooner. But this time the judge went ahead and set us on October 23rd, so that is our current path. But we wanted to make you aware that that is an option in the future if you ever didn't want to have that. In this case being so simple, we thought it was a good one to bring it up in context.
Just for curiosity's sake, what would happen if we did this and then we, for whatever reason, unanimously, strongly disagreed with the position that the judge took?
Correct.
What happened there?
Yes, there's actually, if say the judge found against the respondent in the case, and that respondent has the ability to petition directly to this board under a petition of reconsideration. And what would happen is we would produce a transcript of the full hearing, all of the exhibits, and a copy of the order, and this board could review it and make a determination on whether they agreed with the ALJ. I believe we might also even be able to do that from the agency side. So even, I think, win or lose, we could technically file a petition of reconsideration for your all's review. In order to make sure that you're comfortable with the determination. Obviously, our agency, we don't normally do that unless we lose, but that is an option. There's also an appeal right to Chancery Court, which would be true before the board or before the judge.
That would be my question. I'm less concerned about, I'm concerned about it. I'm more concerned about the judge finding in a way that would be inconsistent with what we would find, not for ill intent, obviously, but perhaps because they may not understand the nuance. And so would we be able then to petition for that? Or it would just seem to me that if I were making a decision at Commerce and Insurance and the board delegated the responsibility to the judge but then didn't like what happened, I would be hard-pressed as a government executive to allow that board then to get a second bite at the apple, even though they can under the UAPA.
Right, and you're not wrong. I mean, from our perspective, the agency would more likely petition if we thought it did set some sort of precedent. Obviously, as you know, there's no true precedential value, but that doesn't mean people don't use it persuasively in the future, right? They still have an order, they still can point to it and say, it's been found this way. There are mechanisms for that as far as through the petition, but you are right. That's why a lot of our boards are very selective on what they delegate to ALJs. They want to maintain control of things that are going to be subject matter expert areas. Unlicensed activity is a common one to delegate, but you're right that this board's a little different in trying to determine what a test work is. Makes it a little more complex.
Are y'all still trying to settle this case with the respondent, or is that time passed?
We're always open to settlement. We're always open to settlement. Whether they communicate with us is the challenge.
Because I sense a lot of uneasiness in granting that authority
I
from
mean,
everybody here. So.
What I understand is there's some risk, but I don't want to unfairly put words in your mouth, but what you're saying is of all the areas where you could mitigate risk through delegation, that this would be the one that's most likely to be the least risky because it's pretty straight, pretty cut and dry. Is that right?
That's right. And also when you're dealing with an unlicensed individual, you're dealing with someone who doesn't have a property right, and so there's also different lower standards as far as our internal procedure. But
If it's
again,
cut and dried, would that also mean it probably would not be a prolonged hearing?
correct. Either way, we intend it
Don't
to
say
be pretty
that.
short. But yeah, not
No.
I do have a reputation for being very wrong about that.
No promises.
I have lied to the Motor Vehicle Commission about lengths of hearings many, many times, so do not believe me when I tell you that. But at this point, we intend it to be short.
You know if this individual is represented by legal counsel?
They are not currently.
What's your pleasure on this? Would someone like to make a motion to?
Can I ask one other question? Is there a pressing need to do this before October? No. I mean, is the person engaged in unlicensed activity, and will that continue until some action is taken place? No. Okay.
Maybe I'll ask a question. Has this person planned to attend at a hearing?
Undetermined.
Do what?
That is undetermined. We don't. You would assume with the continuance that they intend to appear. So I'll say that. So obviously there is enough want. Often we do not hear from folks at all, and then they do not appear. This person did reach out and ask for the date to be moved. You can draw a conclusion that means they intend to be here, but it doesn't always. It really doesn't always mean that. Sometimes it's just you see something from a judge, you get panicked, and you move it. So I can't say whether they're going to be here. They've not expressed one way or the other directly to us whether they intend to be there. They did state the October 23rd date worked for their calendar.
What was the reason again? Sickness?
Illness.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll offer my thoughts. I'm all for efficiency. I'm also for making sure we don't let go of something and lose control of it if we need to. This seems like, from what Ms. Page is saying, that of all the potential risky areas, this is the least risky. So if we're looking for some efficiency and we're looking for trying to get this thing closed before October, I could be okay with that. At the same time, I balance that with we have a job to do, and I don't want to try to shirk that responsibility by delegating it to a judge when, in fact, we are the experts in the area. The board as a whole is the experts in the area. So as a result of that, I kind of personally tend to lean towards let's schedule a hearing and let us be the fact finder. But I don't know that it's, based on what I'm hearing, that it's the end of the world if we aren't.
That's a motion. I'll second it.
I heard both sides.
I would lean towards just for the board to do it for us to be the fact finder, not delegate it. But I don't know that it's the end of the world if we don't. So I'm happy to make the motion if other people, I see a bunch of heads nods. So I'll move that. Do we need to move or not?
If you like, or we can just keep it status quo because currently it's set for October 23rd. Proceed as
Yeah, I was going
normal.
to say if there's absent a motion to let an advocate judge hear it, I think we're on for October. We just leave it alone. So
It'll be me and a co-counsel, Ashley Gino, working that case together. She'll get to meet another one of our newer, fantastic attorneys. So.
Bound and determined to keep taking our free lunches away.
That's right. That's right. Well, if I get Panera out of it, you know.
it's not free lunch they use.
Or per diem lunch, that's right.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to NASBA activities and committee reports, and I think this is probably going to be pretty quick. But Larry, you're on the audit committee. You want to?
Yes, I am, and the audit committee has done nothing since our last meeting because there's been no meetings, and NASBA's year end is June, so our next meeting will be in September, and we'll be reviewing LBMC's audit report at that time.
Okay. Judy, you're on the ethics committee, I believe.
We're very active. We had the pleasure, actually, at the tail end of the Eastern Regional meeting to meet and get to know everyone. For the most part, everyone was there face to face, and that was a very good meeting. We discussed a couple of responses we needed to make to ISBA on professional skepticism, meeting the public expectations, and we had about 10 questions that we responded to. I have our response to that with me. If anyone wants any detail on that, we had a lot of robust conversation on that, though, and we've also had a follow-up conference call on it. I think everyone here would be delighted with the responses, just given the discussions we have over the role of the CPA. And we also are currently responding to the AI CPA regarding disclosing client information in connection with the quality review. There were 5 questions there, and I also have that with me, and we'll be submitting our responses to both of those organizations within the next week and a half. So, but we already have them all drafted if anybody is interested in more detail.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
We probably will have another conference call fairly soon, so with other items.
Senator, I know you were on the RITF task force, and do you want to give us an update there, or is anything?
Well, we've not had any further meetings since the AICPA representatives were on a conference call with the task force, and mainly that was to go through the information that was going to be presented at the regional meetings, which they did present that information. And so they're continuing to work on, I guess, getting more information and clarification from the AICPA's perspective. So I think we're pretty much done unless something else comes up.
Jack Daly, who's the NASBA board member that chaired that committee, reported at the board meeting we had last week, and that's consistent with what he said. I mean, I think that everybody seems to be very pleased with the AICPA's response, and while there may be a few things left to give the AICPA, they took it serious, they responded appropriately, and everybody seems to be pretty satisfied with the answers. So, I miss anybody else on the NASBA committee? We had a board meeting last week, and I'll make just a few comments about that, but I am chairman of the Accounting Licensing Database Committee, and there's also a public segment of that I can't get into the accounting licensing database. Only Wendy and staff can do that, and as chairman of the committee, they won't even let me in there. But there's a public-facing part of that doesn't have all the details and data and thing in it that anybody can get into. I mean, you can get on the NASBA website and find a person if a person's licensed in another state and so forth. You just can't see all the bad stuff that might be in the record, that Wendy, y'all use that a lot. I guess that's one of the tools from NASBA that we do use in doing our everyday jobs quite frequently. So, yeah. There are now 52 state jurisdictions, I guess, that are on the database, and the other 3 states are working on coming online. I think that's maybe Hawaii, Utah, and Delaware, as I remember. But there are 3 states that aren't on there yet, but they've got plans, and they're working with NASBA on coming on board. The database is there's actually the previous chairman and committees did a strategic plan, a 5-year strategic plan for that database, and we're in like the next to last year of that plan. And there's some things that they had time frames for doing certain things, and we can't do them because until the system goes through a rebuild, and this is stuff like to allow additional discipline or information feeds, maybe like people like the IRS, Department of Labor, other governmental agencies, and the rebuild of the system has kind of taken a lesser priority than some of the other things that NASBA's doing, like the CPE tool that we talked about yesterday, the new gateway, I guess, which is how people get onto NASBA and apply to get, to take the exam and so forth. And but they don't want to rebuild the system in the old programming language. It's programmed in a language that nobody apparently is using anymore, and certainly the new things that NASBA's doing are in a different language. So I expect that to get on the priority list and go through a rebuild sometime in the next year or two. So as far as the board meeting, this board meeting was pretty much business as usual. I mean, it's receiving financial information, approving minutes of prior meeting, getting updated reports from Colleen and Ken Bishop about what's going on at NASBA and things like that. The pathway issue, which Colleen talked about this morning, was probably the outside of the ordinary things, was one of the biggest things talked about, and you heard from her this morning what went on, so I won't repeat all that. We heard from Jack Daly on the RITF task force and results there. We did get an update from on the mutual recognition agreement with Australia and New Zealand, and the lady that chairs that, I tell you, she puts in a lot of time. I mean, there are other people that have full-time jobs, but just to participate in that whole debate and evaluation process, I know that she, probably more than any other board member there, gives a lot of her time. So the last thing is there was a nominating committee report of the new officers and directors for NASBA, and just to let you all know, I have been serving as a regional director since last November, last annual meeting. Normally that's a 1-year term, and you can be reappointed for additional years, and NASBA really likes for you to do that. It's kind of like first year you're learning what you need to do and what your job is and how NASBA works. I made a decision back in the spring not to resubmit my name, and it's personal reasons. I don't want to get into all those, but it's the right decision for me and the right decision for NASBA that I not try to serve beyond my term, which will end in November. But Andy Bonner has submitted his name to be nominated. Andy will do a great job of that. So that pretty much concludes my comments on NASBA, unless anybody has any questions. Okay. Let's go to the board committee reports, and licensing committee is first. So, Larry.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, and fellow board members, the licensing committee met yesterday to discuss 3 issues or situations that we had presented to us. The first one being an applicant who, or a candidate who has requested an extension of time for conditional credit. We discussed this issue at length, and this applicant has several chains of events that happened to her, and we were sympathetic to all the events that happened. None of any would have been any that most people would want to go through, but there was a synopsis at the end of her request that summarized those, and we felt like the one that was the most overriding that our decision was that her house burned down in January of 18, and her audit credit was going to expire in June of 18, which it did. She had requested an extension of the audit credit through March of 19. Our committee would like to make the motion to this, to grant that extension request.
Okay, we've got a motion. Is there a second?
Second that.
Okay, motion is second. Is there any further discussion? This was discussed, I think, yesterday in sufficient detail, but is there any further comments or questions today?
As we said yesterday, the decision was made based on the house, the total loss of her house, which destroyed all of her study materials and so forth.
All right, hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Number two, we had an applicant residing in Texas, Dallas, Texas, who was requesting upper division credit for an information systems course that was taken at a community college in Texas, Mountain View College. It was noted by the committee that the state of Texas does allow credit for this type of course at this type of college. However, in the state of Tennessee, we have not traditionally given colleges to be counted as upper level, upper credit courses. So this request for counting this course.
So that's a motion.
That's a motion.
I'll
Okay.
second.
All right, a motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, the third issue we had was a very similar one, almost identical in that this question upper division credit for two courses. One was a Principles of Audit course and one was a tax course. Here again, taking college, don't know. Again, this is very similar to the other case where we have traditionally denied upper division credit for courses taken at community colleges, and so our committee
Okay, got a motion, and do I need a
Second that.
motion is second. Any discussion of this motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
that is
Okay. Thank you, Larry.
Mr. Chairman, end of that committee meeting yesterday, we discussed giving staff authority to make some of those decisions.
yes.
If you would,
Yes, our committee discussed the fact that in cases like these last two where it was very clear based on precedent in previous issues like this that it was a clear case of something that we have not traditionally approved, that we would grant that decision-making authority to staff unless they felt it was unclear or not as clear-cut as it might be. But
For
otherwise,
this-
we would grant them the authority to make the
Right,
decision.
for this specific issue of community college credit, right?
Yes, yes.
Do we need to approve a motion on that, or I think we're just giving direction to staff? I mean,
think we actually voted on that yesterday as a committee.
They would like a vote to approve that recommendation.
I'll make that motion that in the cases of community college credit being requested for upper level courses, that we grant the decision-making to staff, except in cases where it was not clear-cut.
I second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That concludes your report, Mr. Elmore, okay? Mr. Roberts, we'll go to the Enforcement Committee.
Mr. Chairman, we had a couple of housekeeping items we talked about first. One we want to mention on the record here for the full board is that Sarah Page is our legal counsel now going forward. We're very excited about that. We appreciate that. We reviewed complaint statistics. It looks like, based on some trends we're seeing, that there's a lot of good work being done by an investigator, our legal counsel, and our staff, and we appreciate that. We looked at the legal report, and we have a recommendation for you based on some comments and some motions and amendments we made. You have a new legal report waiting on you today. If you look through those, there's some blue text, and where the blue text is and the recommendations it reflects our amendments. Now, all of you were here yesterday, so I'll go through pretty quickly. But for the record, let you know that items number 1 through 13, the committee is going to recommend to the board that we accept legal counsel's recommendation. We had an amendment to number 14. Numbers 15 through 17, we agreed. We're going to make the motion to adopt legal's recommendation originally. We amended number 18. We adopted the legal recommendation for number 19. We amended number 20. We adopted 21 and 22 as originally recommended, and we amended number 23. Now, in addition to this report that was waiting on you, there was a supplemental report provided yesterday to all the board members and the committee, and it had one case. That case was not included on this new report. So, for the record, I will read in the number was case 201-803-2481, and we also recommended to accept legal's recommendation of that case. So I will make a motion on behalf of the committee that for both the legal report that was in front of you today as well as the supplement from yesterday, that we approve it as it currently sits, as amended yesterday.
Okay, we got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second. Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? And again, we had, just for the record, we had a significant discussion yesterday on the legal report, and every board member was present for that discussion. So any further discussion, any further comments today? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the Enforcement Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. That was much better than we've had in the past, so I appreciate your efforts to streamline that. Yes, sir. Yep. Okay, laws and rules, Gay?
Okay. We had legal counsel kind of reviewed 3 changes that are effective or will be in the near future. Those include the firm name rules, the peer review rules, and the CPE rules. So we kind of talked about that. Then we had a discussion about the latest CPE rules with nano-learning, technical fields of study. There was some discussion. The committee voted to recommend to the full board that we accept this rule change, and that is what we did. So we're making that recommendation.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the rule change? And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, so this is the board officially approving this rule, so we have this process we have to go through. So I can turn it over to Liz for her to walk through that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And because the board has already discussed these rule changes at length at yesterday and at previous meetings, I won't need to read all of the rule changes into the record, but I will need to read the answers to the regulatory flexibility addendum and the additional information required by the Joint Government Operations Committee. So we'll actually need 2 roll call votes, one that we can do now where you're approving the rule changes, and a second to approve the answers to the questions that I'm going to read into the record. Did that make sense? Okay.
But you'll tell us when we need to vote. Right.
Yes, sir. We'll need one motion to approve the rule amendments that will be by roll call vote, and then I will read the answers to the 2 sections of questions, and we'll need another motion to approve the answers to the questions by roll call vote.
So you need the first vote right now. I mean, we just
Yes, sir.
we just took a vote. We need to do it by roll call, correct?
Yes, sir. That's
okay.
correct.
All right. So we will entertain a motion, or Gay, I guess, if you want to make a...
I move that we accept the rule changes, and we'll do the roll call vote.
A motion, a second. Any discussion? Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Gabe Roberts.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Next, I'm going to read the regulatory flexibility addendum. I apologize, this is a bit long, but this is the opportunity for the board to interject any last-minute edits you might have before these get passed along to our internal review. First question is the type or types of small businesses and an identification and estimate of the number of small businesses subject to the proposed rule that would bear the cost of or directly benefit from the proposed rule. The Tennessee State Board of Accountancy governs over 2,000 registered firms. While a vast majority of those firms are small businesses, they will neither bear the cost nor directly benefit from the proposed amendments to Rules 0020-05-.01, Rule 0020-05-.03, Rule 0020-05-.04, Rule 0020-005-.07, and Rule 0020-05-.08. From here on, I will refer to them as the rules because the proposed amendments promote consistency throughout the rules. Question 2, the projected reporting, record keeping, and other administrative costs required for compliance with the proposed rule, including the type of professional skills necessary for preparation of the report or record. The proposed amendments to the rules will not impose any additional reporting, record keeping, and other administrative costs required for compliance. All licensees, without exception, must comply with the continuing professional education requirements. The proposed amendments further clarify the types of CPE courses that may be submitted for approval. All licensees are required to timely manage their CPE courses and corresponding approval. Number 3, a statement of the probable effect on impacted small businesses and consumers. The amendments to the rules will likely reduce confusion among licensees, small businesses, and consumers about CPE requirements. Consumers will also be better protected because the proposed amendments better explain what is required of licensees to maintain their CPE hours. Consumers and small businesses will likely benefit because the proposed amendments to the rules clarify the existing rules and promote consistency of the terms technical fields of study and non-technical fields of study. Accordingly, the proposed amendments will not have any negative effect on small businesses and consumers. The proposed amendments to the rules will benefit consumers because the amendments enhance the board's ability to oversee CPE programs and requirements. The board's oversight of these programs is essential for ensuring that licensees are properly educated on changes to existing practices. Number 4, a description of any less burdensome, less intrusive, or less costly alternative methods of achieving the purpose and objectives of the proposed rule that may exist and to what extent the alternative means might be less burdensome to small businesses. The board avers that the proposed amendments to the rules are not burdensome, intrusive, or costly to small businesses. Number 5, a comparison of the proposed rule with any federal or state counterparts. There are no known federal or state counterparts to the rules. Number 6, analysis of the effect of the possible exemption of small businesses from all or any part of the requirements contained in the proposed rule. Exemption from the rules would not benefit small businesses because all licensees, even those working for a small business, must maintain their CPE hours. The proposed amendments do not impose any new requirements on small businesses. Rather, the proposed amendments only clarify which courses a licensee can submit for his or her CPE hours. CPE hours are vital in ensuring that the licensees remain knowledgeable about current trends and important changes in the profession. This rule will not have a projected impact on local governments. Next, I will read a few questions from the Joint Operations Committee, and then after that, the board can entertain a motion to approve the answers to the questions. Letter A, a brief summary of the rule and a description of all relevant changes in previous regulations effectuated by such rule. The amendments to Rule 0020-05-.01 add a definition for technical fields of study and non-technical fields of study, which describe the technical subjects and non-technical subjects that were previously listed individually throughout the CPE requirement section of the rules. By placing the individual subjects under the categories of technical fields of study and non-technical fields of study, the board can be more consistent throughout the CPE rules. The definition also helps the board align with the terminology of the national organization, NASBA, which will promote consistency for licensees registered in other jurisdictions. Providing a definition of technical fields of study and non-technical fields of study in the definition section of the rules will make it easier for licensees to see what subjects will qualify for specific CPE requirements. The amendments to Rule 0020-05-.03 changed the specific list of qualifying subject matters into technical fields of study as consistent with the change to the definition section. The amendments to this rule also change the licensee's responsibility for record keeping of CPE certificates. Previously, the licensees were only required to maintain a list of completed CPE courses. The amendment to Rule 0020-05-.03 provides that the licensees are now required to submit certificates of completed CPE courses when requested by the board. The amendments to Rule 0020-05-.04 clarify the sources of qualifying learning activities that must meet the statements on standards for continuing education programs, which has been jointly approved by NASBA and AICPA. The amendments to this rule also add technical reviewer to The amendments to this rule also add technical reviewer to the list of those participants who are eligible to receive CPE credit for specific service. The amendments to this rule also edit the misspelling of the word ensure from the previous rule. The amendment to Rule 0020-05-.07 corrects the spelling of the word extension in the title of the rule. The amendment to Rule 0020-05-.08 utilizes the new addition of the definition for technical fields of study in place of the specifically listed subjects. Letter B, a citation to and brief description of any federal law or regulation or any state law or regulation mandating promulgation of such rule or establishing guidelines relevant thereto. There are no known federal laws or regulations mandating promulgation of these rules. Tennessee Code Annotated 62-1-105E authorizes the board to adopt rules to enforce the Tennessee Accountancy Act of 1998. Letter C, identification of the persons, organizations, corporations, or governmental entities most directly affected by this rule, and whether they urge or reject this rule. The proposed amendments to the rules stated above will impact all licensed CPAs. Their position, however, is unknown to the board. Letter D, the identification of any opinions of the Attorney General and reporter or any judicial ruling that directly relates to the rule. There are no known Attorney General opinions or judicial rulings that directly relate to these rules. And finally, letter E, an estimate of the probable increase or decrease in state and local government revenues and expenditures, if any, resulting from the promulgation of these rules and assumptions and reasoning upon which the estimate is based. These rules are not expected to have an increase or decrease in state and local government revenues and expenditures. Thank you for your time.
I guess we need a motion to approve the answers that were just read to us that are contained in the regulatory flexibility addendum and the, I guess, additional information required by the Joint Government Operations Committee. So if someone would like to make that motion.
So moved.
Okay, I got a motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I just have one question here. I know it's late in the game, but I know that both Trey and Stephen were talking about having the licensee submit a list along with their renewal application. Wouldn't this be the place where we could add that? And since we're already have changes to this rule, where we could just put that in?
I don't believe under our current rules that we would need to make a change in order to allow the board to do that.
Okay.
It does ask, and under the renewal section, it says that the board may require certain actions,
If
and
requested.
that would be one
Okay.
of them. So it's written broadly so that you can change the renewal requirements in that way.
I just felt like we might need to address that if it required a rule change.
If the board
Okay.
feels more comfortable making making a specific change in that section, we can do that as well. We could do that as a separate rule, or we could add it to this rule packet if you're not ready to move forward with this rule packet. But I don't believe a change is necessary in order for the board to request that at the time of renewal.
Are there any?
I'm satisfied with that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? And we need to have a roll call vote again.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Gabe Roberts.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Casey Stewart.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
The rule and the answers to the questions appear to have passed, so I will move them forward with our internal review. After that, they will go to the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office, back to the Attorney General's office for a signature, and then we file them with the Secretary of State.
And what kind of time frame are we looking for all that to happen?
The typical time frame is about 9 months. Your board has seen rules move through in about 6 or 7 months. So your board is doing really well with the rulemaking process. It really just depends on a lot of external factors and how fast things move at the AG's office, governor's office, et cetera. But when the rules are drafted, we send out a notification to everybody that is registered under our electronic notification system. They get an email with the proposed rule amendments, and they have time to send an email to me with comments. They also will get a notification when we file them with the Secretary of State, and at that point they will have 90 days before the rule is effective to oppose any rule amendment, so they can write in comments at that time as well. They can also attend the Government Operations Committee and voice their opinions at that time. So the licensees that are registered for the electronic notification system should get plenty of notice about these proposed changes.
Okay.
Anticipate the change in administrations slowing this process up or speeding it up one way or the other?
I don't see
No.
any really contentious
Not.
amendments here. However, it really just depends on the climate of the legislature. We haven't really had any, just on past experience, we haven't really had any issues with the governor's office, that step in things. But the legislature, it's been a different climate lately, so you just never know. So we just have to go. That's why I read the answers to the questions on the record. Wanted to make sure the board was comfortable with our answers. Those are the answers that I will take to the Government Operations Committee and defend for your rule amendments. Was there any other questions about the rulemaking process? And if ever anybody has a specific question or wants to see the status of where one of our rules is at, please feel free to email me.
Okay. Is that all we need to do at this point with regard to the rule
Yes, sir.
change? Okay. Okay, do you have anything else from your committee? Okay, the executive committee met yesterday and had 3 items on our agenda: the year-to-date financial results, travel information, and then the international reciprocity with CPA Australia. But the financial results, everybody had a chance to see those before the meeting and see them again yesterday during the meeting. Wendy made a number of verbal comments in addition to the written comments in there. Wendy, do you have anything to add today from what was said yesterday about the financial report?
I do not.
Okay. Then I'd like to make a motion on behalf of the committee that we approve that report as presented and as the comments were made yesterday. So I'll make that a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? The second item on the agenda yesterday was travel information, and that was primarily for information purposes only, and I don't believe that there were a couple of questions, but basically the travel information is what it is, and I think everybody was completely satisfied with the answers to the questions that were raised yesterday. The international reciprocity with CPA Australia, we made a decision to not vote on that in committee yesterday, but to bring it before the whole board today. We had the opportunity to hear Colleen's comments about that process. I know going to regional meetings and board meetings, received a lot of written documentation. I've had the opportunity to hear a lot of verbal comments that I know many of you have not had a chance to see, but I can tell you it is a very rigorous, well thought out process that goes on, and I would like to see us move forward and improve this reciprocity agreement with CPA Australia. Our rules and laws permit us to do that. They permit us to rely on NASBA and the AICPA in doing that. So I would like to see it move forward. Wendy, do you have any other comments to make? I mean, we may never have an individual that this agreement comes into play with, but there's been a lot of effort and time expended that it could benefit one of our licensees that tries to go to Australia. It's a two-way street, and so I would very much like to see us. Do you have any other comments?
Just to reiterate, I guess from yesterday, this does not happen very often. Not that that's a reason to approve it or not approve it, but I think we are handling our second one that I can recall in the past 3 years that I've been here. We have a CPA from Canada looking to, with a Big Four firm looking to relocate to the U.S. And so we're working through that with them right now.
Okay.
I think with our music industry, we may see more of that in the future with the Australian. I mean, I've actually worked with an Australian CPA, they're chartered accountants there, I believe, and I was blown away with his. He is now gone. He was with a New York firm, but he's now gone back to Australia, and he works actually within the government with the way they handle the licensing of chartered accountants and whatnot. I have always been impressed with those guys, and especially with him. And I think there are times when our requirements are less than, like Colleen was talking about, than Germany, and I feel like we should move ahead and not have a roadblock to someone coming.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the reciprocity with Australia.
Okay, got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion, a second, and we can open it up for further discussion.
I got a couple comments, all right. I'm not saying I'm against this. I think that where my concern is, and I think it was reiterated today, earlier, I don't know a whole lot about the Australian ICAA, or the, whatever this, what's the actual?
CPA Australia.
Okay, CPA Australia.
Practicing accountant.
So my question is, we don't, we have CPAs and we have CMAs, and there, there's a difference in the how we recognize those. CPAs can sign financial statements as audits, and CMAs can't, correct? My question is one of these organizations more closely aligned to the CMA designation? In fact, then they allow them to sign, and so that makes them qualified in Australia. However, if it really truly reciprocated towards here, they would be closer aligned to the CMAs. Are we letting a group that's not, it's more of a CMA type position coming over here and reciprocate as a CPA? That's number one. Number two, and I really would like to know that, but I mean, if we want to vote without knowing it, that's fine.
Tell you my experience. I was on a committee with a CPA from Australia. Really, he blew me away with his knowledge. I mean, he was very sharp. He actually went back and got the CGMA, but how he did it was he actually sat for the CMA exam and got that, and then got his CGMA through the CMA side. But he was already a CPA, and in one of his discussions, he was talking about how difficult it was to get signed up with all of his credentials, that CMA would not sign him up even though he was a CPA in Australia. So he already had the ability to sign as a CPA, but he wanted to get the other side to help his clients and actually have that designation. And so they did not. He aligned more with the CPA side than he did with the CGMA side.
That's just one of the credentials, though. What about the other one? Are they both closely aligned to our CPA, or is one of them more closely aligned towards this? Because, again, you can pick up random comments about it. Or is one of them closer aligned to the CGMA, and we're letting people in that?
Stephen, what I heard Colleen say this morning, and what I've heard in every presentation that somebody's presented, one of these agreements, it's a substantial equivalency thing. I mean, in terms of education, in terms of the exam requirements, this is an agreement with CPA Australia, not the chartered accountants or management accountants. It's with CPA Australia, and there's a rigorous vetting process, and the information they provide, in these presentations that I've had an opportunity to see and you haven't, but detailed page after page of details of the agreement, and things that are going to govern how this process works going forward. So I am totally comfortable with the process that's gone on to ensure that it's substantially equivalent to what you would have to do here in the state of Tennessee and in the United States to become certified.
I would submit this. I would be very surprised. There's 2 organizations in Australia, correct? One of them we've already approved as having reciprocity, right, or whatever we call the terminology. I would be hard-pressed to think that organization would allow us to sign up a competing organization if their standards were substantially less than theirs. That would be my thought process in this particular instance. So I would think that just from the standpoint of just from my own logic, I'm sitting here thinking through, like, if I was a competing organization in Australia, I sure would not be happy if they were considering a lesser certificate holder from a different organization. So I've got to believe just that it would be surprising to me.
I've read just lightly about the 2, and I have 2 things to say. everything I've read seems to say that the consensus is that the CPA test and process is not as rigorous as the CA. That seems to be the consensus from what I've read. Also, the recommendation seems to be if you want to be an auditor, get the CA. You know, some of them said suck it up and get the CA. With that said, I have come, just in my thought process in the last day, I've come to think that we do need to trust the process, and that if we have concerns, we need to take those to the people doing the process, because I think it is, I mean, I keep saying I wish that our states would work more together and NASBA would represent all of us, and I think that we need to support this vetting process because of the international firms, because of the people that rely on it. But I think if we have concerns about the process, we need to take that forward.
I'll make one last comment, and I'm going to shut up and we can vote. I think my point's being missed here. I just want to see the comparison between the two. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's not comparable. I'm not saying it's not, one's better than the other one. I mean, our rules or laws say we may use the IQOB, but I just would like to see a comparison. I mean, I don't think that's an unreasonable request to see as our duty as board to protect the public of Tennessee in the CPA industry. I mean, that's, you know, we're just taking a blind faith test. I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying that they did a bad job. I would just like to see it. You know, to me, seeing is believing, not believing in what someone said. I mean, I'd like to just look at it. I don't think that's a hard thing to look. So that's all I'm going to say. That's the whole point of my concern with that.
Just to respond to that, when we went to the meeting, they actually got up and gave an hour presentation of the similarities and the different things and the reason why that they entered into the agreement. And so they gave a list of everything, and they come back with the conclusion that they did align. You know, I was kind of surprised that with our requirement for experience that they even considered us, because, you know, they have over 5 years that you have to have experience before you can even become a CPA. But the Australia side did align and enter into the agreement. And so I think that they did a very detailed job of explaining that, you know, and I actually have the slides or some of them, but I'm sure that we could get, you know, the information from NASBA to you know, to show that.
Okay, are there any further comments or questions?
Perhaps a suggestion next time, just have them submit the information. If it's that simple and that's easy, we would have saved a heck of a lot of time just having it here, take 10 minutes to look at it, move on. I mean, that's my due diligence I would like to do.
And following this meeting, regardless of how you vote, I will find the information and forward it to all of you.
I do think it's important. I know in our Nashville practice, we have sent at least 2 practitioners that I can think of to Australia in global relocations. And so, you know, it's a two-way street, as we talked about, although I guess we could, as Colleen was saying, it could even be a unilateral street. But in this case, it's a two-way street. And Dr. Church, I appreciate your commentary with respect to, at some point, you know, understanding the process and the interests of a unified position. There are a number of issues. You know, the CPA exam, we are relying essentially on, you know, other institutions to basically make sure that process works, and we participate with other testing jurisdictions in it. And this is another example of that. And I think it's good to be skeptical and to make sure there's a diligence process. But I think that organization has done that, and I accept the work that they've done.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Got a motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm opposing for lack of information.
Okay. Duly noted. And we will try to get you some information. Okay, that brings us to old business. I'm not aware of any old business. Is anyone else? Under the topic of new business, the year goes fast, the year is over. We need to elect some new officers for the coming year and new committees. And I guess there's no defined process that I'm aware of for this, so.
Can I ask a question? Is anybody in the current slate unwilling to serve for another year? Or are you willing to serve for another year?
Yep. Yep. I would suggest that we do it one position at a time, Trey. I mean, we start with the chairman. I'm willing to serve for another year, but I'm also willing to support anybody else that might be elected. So I've got 1 year left, and I'm going to give it my best shot to.
I move we I nominate Casey Stewart as chairman.
Second.
That.
Any discussion of that motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, let's take vice chairman next.
I'll make a motion to nominate Stephen Eldridge.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, congratulations, Steve.
Same to you.
Secretary?
Motion of Gay Moon, continuing as secretary.
Second that.
I got a motion and a second, and we really need some discussion on this one. No.
I'd like a matrix showing comparison.
Okay, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I bet hers.
Handwriting looks a lot cooler than on the certificates. I always just felt inadequate signing my name. Don had like such a artistic name where he would do it. I tried one time and it kind of messed up. And
I only had to do it once, so that made it easier.
awful.
The last item on the agenda is the appointment of board committees, and what I would like to do there as chairman is what we did a year ago, rather than take everybody's time of trying to set those committees here, is to ask each of you if you're particularly interested on a committee or whatever it is you might want to do over the next year, is to communicate that to Wendy, and she and I will get together and make some determinations. But you may feel like the committee on now that you've learned all you can there and you want to serve on a different committee. But let Wendy know what your thoughts are, what your preferences are, and we'll go from there. Wendy, there was some discussion yesterday. I wasn't a party to it, but about how the committees are functioning, and you want to kind of.
So, I've been part of a few conversations regarding the structure of our meetings and maybe what the right way to do that is. So right now we have 2-day meetings. On the first day, the committees meet, and then the full board meets on the second day. A few years ago, it was suggested by a prior chairman that everyone attend all committee meetings so that they would hear the conversation and we wouldn't have to rehash items at the board meeting itself. So we operate in kind of an unconventional fashion when it comes to committees. So there have been some comments regarding, possibly getting rid of committees and having a 2-day board meeting, to possibly going back to the conventional way of committee structure, where you show up for your committee, you do the dirty work of that committee, and you let the other committees do their work as well, and make recommendations to the board. So just thought it might be a good time to get that out, and if anyone has any ideas or thoughts as to how to be more efficient with our board meetings, if we need to move in a different direction, feel free to make some comments.
I'm not sure about everybody else here, but I know in my first 2 or 3 years on the board, the agenda for the committees had a time frame, like, executive committee start at 1 o'clock and licensing at 2 o'clock and so forth, and we only had to be here for our committee. and I'm not sure what changed that, but I mean, this board over the last year, everybody's been here for all the committee meetings. Now, one thing that happened yesterday is we had to change the order of the committees because maybe you could still work around a situation like that if you have the assigned times for the committees. But I like what we've been doing the last year. I mean, I think it really speeds up the board process, voting process, and decision process on the board meeting date. I would tell you this again. I've only visited with Mississippi. I'm scheduled to go to the Kentucky board meeting next month, and then to Alabama in September, and so I'll have a little more feedback. But Mississippi board uses committees, but they really rely on what the committees recommend. I mean, once it comes to the board, their meeting was very quick and very efficient, and they don't wind up generating all the discussion of what the committees did in the board session. I'll find out what Kentucky does, next month. And one thing that I've learned at NASBA, and it really came home in this breakout session that we just had at the East Regional meetings, is how different every state is. I mean, we just talked about getting a rule change through, and it takes 9 months, and every state has some issue like that. But the topic came up in this breakout session of CPE and what was going on in the states. What you found out there were 8 regions in there, in the southeast region, and you think that many differences, but some states require 40 hours per year, some require 80 hours every 2 years, one state requires 120 every 3 years. Some states have absolutely no technical CP requirement. It can all be soft subjects. Others have a 50%, others have a set hour of technical, and so just in that room,
carryover. Some of them didn't have carryover privileges.
Yeah, so the Uniform Accountancy Act is gradually getting rid of some of those differences, but there are still huge differences out there among the states, and it is so slow to get changes made. Every state has a legislative process to go through, and so NASBA, I think, does an excellent job of listening. You heard Colleen, she was making some notes of the comments this morning, of listening to what's going on at the states and trying to, I know you had a question with CPE reciprocity with Florida, and that came up in this breakout session, and the board member that was in that session acknowledged that Florida is just awful with the CPE.
I can attest to that.
And they're trying to get it changed.
Right.
But it's a legislative process to go through. So they're really trying. It's just difficult when you've got that many jurisdictions and you've got strong personalities on every board.
Casey, I would like to we talked about these times being listed just in terms of these meetings. One of the reasons we switched from having assigned times was because some committees would finish early and some would run late. And so by having one time, it's properly noticed. And so therefore, you can jump from one committee right into the next one without having to sit around and wait. I know you and I have been here for some formal hearings where they used to set times on board meeting days, and we'd sit around until 4 o'clock in the afternoon to only find out that the respondent didn't show up. So that I like, having one time listed. I don't know if by chance, if we have presentations like the NASBA presentation today, which was not lengthy by any means, can those be moved to committee days? I do like the fact that we're all here for committee hearings, because I think that makes the final day much easier without a lot of questions, because a lot of us have questions, and then that if we do that during the board meeting day, then that's just going to extend that out. I don't know, is there any reason that NASBA presentation couldn't have been yesterday? And the reason I say that is some of us that are driving from different ends of the state, that just helps shorten the day of the board meeting. And I know I'm spending the night here anyways, the night before, so it's just that's something simple in my mind.
Are you thinking that we would have the committee meetings plus her presentation?
I would think that would be.
Okay.
I mean, I'm suggesting that.
Right.
I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but if
I thought was when I thought about this, I mean, like today, we talk and we deliberate and we discuss and, we come up with recommendations. Why not just go ahead and finish it off on the committee days and have an actual vote? Everybody's here instead of just walking through it, doing your ceremonial vote and moving on. I mean, just take care of it in committee days and knock out a lot of that smaller stuff, save today's date for hearings and requests or that kind of stuff and special things, just to make it a little more efficient. Like Trey said, we're here for the night anyway, so I mean, if we run late on Thursday or Monday night, then it doesn't really matter.
I think that some committees might do well with that. I think enforcement, we're almost going to have to keep it a 2-day because we almost always have amendments to that, and I think it's important for people to really see what those are and make sure that they're comfortable with them. But
Or even other reports, like executive director's report,
Right.
those kind of things. Just
Right.
move those to Monday.
I really like the format that we have as far as having everyone present at the committee meetings. I personally learn a lot in that process and would likely, even if we had set times and we were only required to be here for the committees we sit on, I would likely still be here listening anyway. And I mean, it's probable that a lot of us would. So unless there's a problem with the format that we have now, I like what we do with regard to all of us being here for the committees.
I would ditto that. I think that the format's good. I know that since I've been on the board, sometimes the committees go longer, and my only worry about having a presentation on that day is that I think yesterday was the earliest I had been out, is that we may be here till 6 or 7 o'clock, before we leave on committee day. And if we have a presentation, especially if it's something detailed that we've had in the past. So I kind of like the format that we got, and usually we get everything worked out in the committees and then come here and then, it's a formality, but we have everything and we go through it pretty quick.
I like it because it does give us a night to kind of think about what happened, and then if there are any questions before we have our final vote on motions from the various committees, we've had a chance to think that over, and if another question pops up, you have the chance to discuss it at that time. So I really appreciate our schedule that we have now.
Oh, gosh, I meant to silence that.
Set your alarm to
Time's up.
It's time to adjourn. Yeah. What I'm hearing then is mainly let's keep things like they are, and I think Stephen's got a good idea, because as you put the agenda together, if it looks like we were supposed to have a hearing today that got deferred, but had we had that hearing today, would have been a long day, and so as those situations come up, we could, if we got everybody here for committee day, we could move somebody like Colleen to that earlier day just to use our time a little better or whatever. So I don't know that we have to have a hard and fast rule on that.
I agree. I was just thinking the other thing too, because I know when we talked about making the change from the way it used to be, I asked Mark, I said, why can't we just list a date, time, and have them all at that time, and we start whenever. But I mean, if we have time, we could do the director's report, or we could do some of these other things. If we don't get time, we don't have to do them that day. On
the committee day, basically,
like the
on
board
the first
meeting
day.
starts. I'm never going to say Monday. Monday at 1, and these are the things scheduled. But if we don't get finished, it can always be pushed to day 2. I don't think there's any legal precedence that doesn't allow that. Just like y'all could have stayed till Saturday last meeting and finished up if you had
Almost
wanted to.
did.
Yeah, that's what my sister.
I don't care either way. I think it's a whole lot more efficient than it used to be. But if we can do more to minimize the other.
I'd like to maybe take this a step further and just ask each of you to continue to think about what we do, and maybe you too, Wendy, as staff, because again, every board's different. I would tell you Mississippi meets like every other month rather than quarterly. They only meet for one day, but they do it every other month. Some meet monthly, some every other month, some quarterly. So I don't know if there's anything that says that we have to do this quarterly. We could do it
Have to have a minimum of 4.
Yeah.
So that
So we could meet more frequently,
meet more frequently
but have a
if you-
one-day meeting instead
Correct.
of 2 days or something like that. So just think about that and what the pros and cons might be, and I ask you to think about. I'm good with the way we're doing it, but also not opposed to changing it if there's a. Okay, sir.
Comment.
Okay.
On a different subject.
Sure.
I think over the course of the past 2 days, one of the things that I kind of kept hearing was that the challenge in the accounting industry, there's been an impact with the 150 hours and that sort of thing. I don't know the proper protocol on this. I don't think it's something, I mean, I guess we could change our rules if we wanted to, but then that creates an issue with reciprocity to other states. So I assume the proper channel would be to go through NASBA to do some kind of case study or some kind of polling or something like that, because I do think our numbers have declined over the past however many years. Is it something the board would be interested in requesting formally? I don't know. Again, y'all guided me through this, but making a request that they do some sort of study, or they may already have the data, I don't know, to see if there is a better way to approach the 150 hours versus the 120 hours. 'Cause, I mean, I know when I had to do it, I took sociology as one of my classes, and I don't think that made me any better of an accountant just because I had that extra
Could have.
time. Maybe it did, or maybe worse. More of a, anyway.
This is already in the hopper at NASBA. It may not be as succinct as just focusing on that one issue, but it's part of that broader discussion that Colleen's talking about. And I know that other state boards are raising the same issue.
Well, then my question would be this, is should staff reach out to other boards? And should we be joining with other boards to recommend to NASBA
That's a good idea.
to effectively examine the 150-hour requirement, just from a standpoint of if one board says it over here, there's strength in numbers, obviously, whenever you do anything. I don't know if it's that big of an issue for the profession. Should we be trying to align with different state boards to push NASBA to say, hey, this is a priority, not just part of this overall discussion, but we really think this is important enough that we push this issue. And maybe if we could align with 5 to 10 of these other state boards, I think NASBA would be much more adamant about prioritizing that.
I think a study is important. I think a study to determine how people are meeting the 150 would be very interesting. I hope we don't just say, we need more numbers, let's throw out the 150. That doesn't sound like a prudent thing for a profession to do.
I'm not saying you can't get the 150, but you
Right, no,
you're
but
not
I mean, I think
required.
we need a comprehensive approach so that we're saying, what do we want the people who enter our profession to know, and what process do we want them to have gone through? Not just, throw out the
Well,
extra
examine
30.
the effectiveness of the 150.
Examine
That's
the
what we're
That's a
asking.
good way to say it.
I don't know. That's just one suggestion. I think if 5 state boards asked NASBA that, I think it would be on a different priority level than it would be if we just said, hey, we've sent some of our board members back and we think this is something
I
you ought
can
to do.
certainly carry the message back to
Yeah.
my next meeting, but I've only got one more, and, you know,
Wasn't there some study related to the CPA pipeline and barriers to getting more folks into the pipeline? And I guess I'm wondering if this type of issue is part of that. I don't know.
My understanding that the most recent study was related to why someone starts to sit for the exam and drops out. So you have to get targeted on some of these studies. To my understanding, that was the most recent study.
Well, maybe didn't
So it
cover
wasn't related
this
to
type
the
of issue.
educational requirement. It was related to why do people start sitting and then drop out of the process.
I also think you've got to look at the exam itself, because we have different gateways, and so if we change the education, we have to change the exam. If we change the exam, we have to change the education. And the other thing is that our gateways are now jumbled together time-wise. So used to, you did all your education, and then you did the exam, and then you did the experience. Now you can do them all at once. Is that good, or is it not? And how much of that has just been driven by, we need people? I mean, they need to be very proactive about it.
Well, they talked about opening up the exam as one thought, where possibly we could sit for it all 12 months to open up more opportunities so that people could plan better for taking the exam. And so they're looking at that. And I know they gave, I was
That would
looking
be
for the
welcomed.
presentation. They actually gave a presentation.
I feel like this 150 is something probably nobody wants to touch, if I had to guess, just because we've put ourselves in this hole. And that's why I feel like it might be important for us to align with other boards to push that to the forefront, because, look, NASBA does a lot of great things, but they got a lot of priorities. And do we think this is a high enough priority that it exceeds the other priorities?
And if you look at state board's actions, including ours, people have been going in the back door to try to work around the 150. We have now, I mean, when a lot of states started allowing people to sit pretty much as soon as they finished their undergraduate, for me as a professor, it just stripped the significance of that master's degree. Now, I think we have a very solid master's, and the employers seem to appreciate it. But our poor students are being told by employers, you've got to have that exam passed by the time you get out of the courses, and the students are saying, wow, Ole Miss gives you credit for this, this, and this, and they walk you through the CPA exam, and I'm saying, but are you really learning other things you need to learn about accounting besides just how to pass the exam? And so we've put in some difficult backdoor approaches to try to lessen the 150 impact, I think. So we need to decide the purpose of it and how to achieve it.
In a lighthearted response, I would say that Ole Miss is a top 10 program in the country.
Yes, they are.
Hotty toddy.
You are so right.
Totally just.
Rhodes College cannot prepare all the accountants. I know. We have two PhDs.
Totally.
I don't know what the appropriate step is. I know there's a problem. I mean, I know that, and I'd like to know the question I asked earlier was is there more people taking the test nationwide versus passing or staying in the industry, or I don't know. Are people just getting it because it's something good on a resume and then they just go inactive, or what? I just think that it's a major issue in my opinion. I mean, the number of available students is going down, and then if I can say the demand is going down, I think there's always going to be a demand for it. I like Trey's idea of reaching out to some other boards to see what their thoughts are on this, and if there's a similar thought. I mean, I assume we all have the same feeling that this is an issue we need to pursue, to see what they say, and if we have some similar thoughts, then maybe join together and just say, hey, NASBA, here's what we'd like for you to do.
I can very well do that. I think this really highlights the importance, and I would like to thank Casey for your service on the board, and I'm excited that Andy has thrown his name in the hat to continue. I think that gives us a voice, and they get to report back to us on these things. If we didn't have these people serving, it would be harder to do what you all are talking about. So,
I mean, if he's going to see Kentucky and he's already been to Mississippi,
Yeah.
that's a natural.
Yeah.
And we did an investigation. Didn't we do something with Arkansas? Somebody went over and did something
Yeah.
in Arkansas. And I don't know. I feel like we've worked closely enough with some of these boards that we should be able to reach out and just say, do y'all feel like this is an issue?
Well, I was sitting there thinking one of the things we do as regional directors is host a regional conference call. Topic to, I mean, we had every state.
And I'm thinking more along the lines of a joint letter.
Yeah.
signed by a different state board saying, hey, we feel like this is an important enough issue, in submitting that and saying, okay, there's strength in numbers. We've got 5 boards, we got 10 boards, whatever it is. But we feel like this is a direction we need NASBA to go. We need them to lead on this because you can't unilaterally make this decision.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
So, I don't know.
Okay, good comments. Is there anything else? Anybody? I would like to entertain a motion we adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you,
Anybody
Casey.
opposed, they can stay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terrible example. I should have said University of Phoenix.
messing with you. I'm totally just messing with
His
you.
eyes lit up when you said